Imagine you're in Philadelphia in the summer of 1776. The 13 colonies are trying to answer an impossible question. How can independent states remain free while becoming one nation? Now imagine you're standing on the plains of Moab, more than 3,000 years earlier. Israel has not yet crossed the Jordan. Before a single acre of land is distributed, the Torah conducts a census, not simply to count people, but to constitute a nation, every tribe, every clan, every family. The constitutional framework of Israel is being assembled. Then something astonishing happens. 5 women step forward, the daughters of Zelophehad, according to legend, who was a Sabbath desecrator. They don't ask for mercy. They don't ask for charity. They bring a constitutional challenge. Their case exposes a flaw in the law of the disenfranchised people, and God himself agrees. The daughters of Zelophehad speak rightly. This week, as America celebrates its 250th anniversary, we'll explore what Daniel Elazar called the Covenantal Federalism of ancient Israel, why America's founders looked to the Hebrew Republic for inspiration, and why one of the Bible's greatest constitutional moments belongs not to Moses, but to 5 remarkable sisters who changed the law forever. Welcome to Madlik. My name is Jeffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mantz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on your favorite podcast platform, and now on YouTube and Substack. We also publish a source sheet on Sefaria, and a link is included in the show notes. This week on Parshat Pinchas, we celebrate the independence of Artzot Habrit, the United States. So, welcome to Zelophehad's Daughters of the Revolution. Rabbi, it's going to be Shabbos July 4th.
250 years to the United States. What could be better than that?
And what a better excuse than to look through our texts with a new lens. So here we are in Numbers 26:1, and it starts by saying, when the plague was over. And of course, this has to do with Pinchas, and who has the name of the parsha named after him. But once again, the Israelite community has sinned. They've been punished, and it's time for a new census. God said to Moses and to Elazar, son of Aharon the priest, take a census of the whole Israelite community from the age of 20 years up by their ancestral houses, all Israelites able to bear arms. So Moses and Eleazar the priest on the steppes of Moab at the Jordan near Jericho give instructions about them, namely those from 20 years up, as God has commanded Moses. The descendants of the Israelites who came out of the land of Egypt were Reuben, Israel's firstborn, descendants of Reuben, and now we're going to start seeing him pass down to names that maybe thousands of years ago made sense to anybody, and they know, I knew that guy, I knew that clan, I knew that family. But for us, what they're showing is how material this was, how we were really going into the weeds. The descendants of Reuben, Enoch, the clan of the Enochites, of Palu, the clan of the Paluites, Hezron, the clan of the Hezronites, of Carmi, the clan of the Carmites. These are the clans of the Reubenites. You really get a sense of disparate people joining together. There were 43,730 born to Pulu, Eliab. The sons of Eliab were Nemuel and Datan and Abiram. These are the same Datan and Abiram chosen in the assembly who agitated against Moses and Aaron as part of Korach's band when they agitated against God, whereupon the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with Korach. So, Rabbi, it's not only going into the weeds in terms of families and clans, and you get this sense that they're putting them together, but where appropriate, it's even given a little bit of their baggage, their history, their culture. Yes, the Reubenites, those were the guys who brought us Datan and Aviram. It is kind of fascinating, but if you throw yourself into it, maybe even put on your cap of the Constitutional Convention, you're starting to see different groups, different states, different jurisdictions, different places throughout the country, and they're all kind of coming together. It's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing. Yeah. I mean, it really makes this part of the parsha, which in a way is kind of the dry part of the parsha, it makes it really come alive.
Well, we're going to see in context, it absolutely provides the context that we need. So Emek Dova says, why does it start by saying it came to pass after the plague? The principal purpose of this census was to prepare for the apportionment of the land, as will be explained later. Therefore, the Torah first notes that it took place after the plague because those who remained alive were precisely those who would stand to inherit the land. That's the Ibn Ezra's view as well. But Rabbi, it seems to me that this is not the first time that we've had one of these lists. I mean, we started on Parshat Numbers itself, Bamidbar, and it started with a list.
What do you mean? The book is called Numbers because all it has is a list of numbers of people, right? So that it gave the book the name.
So I think we're going to see that, first of all, there's a little bit of an exception here because it doesn't only include the landowners. We're going to see it actually lists 13 tribes because it brings in the Levites too, who didn't get land, presumably. But also this coming after the plague, it almost seems, and this is what I'm going to argue, that at Parshat Drachim, at episodes, at discrete moments where calamity has occurred, where something is heard, the group has to regroup and almost in a sense recount, but maybe also rededicate themselves to this federation of tribes, make sure everybody's counted, everybody's a flag holder, everybody's a card-carrying member, and presumably, especially after a plague, after hardship hits. And that's what I am going to argue, but it is important to note that the classical commentators do not gloss over the fact that it all starts by saying, Vayehi acharei hamagefa. So now we get to another one of the recitations, and it says, these were the descendants of Gilead, Isaiah, the clan of Israelites, of Helek, the clan of Helekites. I mean, it almost sounds out of a comic book, and we're hearing names like Superman came from, these sound so foreign, all these names, these clans. Shechem, the clan of Shechemites, that rings a chord. Shmida, the clan of the Shmidites. Hefer, the clan of the Heferites. And then in 26:33, it says, now Zelophehad, son of Hefer, had no sons, only daughters. The names of Zelophehad's daughters were Machla, Noah, Hagla, Milcah, and Tirzah. We are going to see that these women are mentioned 3 times in our verses, but again, it's adding some of the baggage. It's adding some of the color, and we're not going to go into the description of every one of these clans and tribes, just the ones that give us a little backstory. So God in 52 said to Moses, saying, among these, the aforementioned, shall the land be apportioned as shares according to the listed names. With larger groups, increase the share. With smaller groups, reduce the share. Each is to be assigned its share according to its enrollment. The land, moreover, is to be apportioned by goral, by lot, and the allotment shall be made according to the listings of their ancestral tribes. Each portion shall be assigned by lot, whether for large or smaller groups. So this too, what we're showing is, Rabbi, this is not some sort of de facto, some kind of just formulaic division of the land. We can imagine, again, if we put on our 3-sided constitutional Congress hat, they were discussing what's fair, what's right, how do we divide things up.
Isn't it interesting that they use a lot, right? If they use something that's totally by chance so that they want to make sure that it's fair and even.
I mean, you can't not but make any other conclusion. It's not drash, it's here.
Right.
Rashi says the names of the tribes were written on 12 tablets, and those of the 12 districts on 12 tablets. They mixed them up in an urn, and the prince of a tribe inserted his hand into it and took out 2 tablets. They came up in his hand, the hand of the tablet bearing the name of the tribe, and the tablet relating to the district that had been declared by the Urim and Tumim to be intended for it. And ultimately, what it is a combination, a hybrid, where the land was not divided by measurement alone. So they didn't say 50 acres, 50 acres, 50 acres, because one district is superior to another. But it was divided by estimating its fertility. A bad piece of land sufficient to sow a core was regarded as the equivalent of a good piece of land sufficient to sow a seah. All dependent upon the value of the soil. Rabbi, I don't think Rashi's reading stuff into here. The rabbis understood that this division, first of all, this bringing in of all of these clans, and then this division of the apportionment that they were going to get was very thought out, very meticulous, and fair is the overriding term here. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It was fair. It didn't allow for favoritism. All the things that we could imagine in terms of trying to build order into a system of 3 million people where it's very hard to create order.
And it wasn't cookie cutter either, because if you notice before, it did say it was apportioned larger land to more people. This was almost representative government. I mean, Rashi has picked to talk about agriculture, but you can imagine other factors entering into it, sociological and things like that. Then in 26, and this is why I said we really have 13 tribes here, these are the clans of Levi. The clan of the Libnites, the clan of the Hebronites, the clan of the Machlites, the clan of the Mushites, and the clan of the Korahites, Kohat begat Amram. Their enrollment was 23,000, comprised all males from a month up. They were not part of the irregular enrollment of the Israelites, since no share was assigned to them among the Israelites. So they get honorable mention, but they are mentioned. And we're going to see that the number 13 has significance to us on July 4th. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Ramban says, and these are they that were numbered of the Levites. He says, I don't know why he commanded the Levites should be counted here. What purpose it served now by counting them, since they did not receive any portion in the land. Answers the Ramban, perhaps they were counted because it was only to these Levites that they gave the 48 cities to dwell in and their open land for their cattle, and not to those who were born afterwards. Rabbi, the different tribes had different functions. We have something called Washington, D.C. It does not have senators. I had to Google that. I had to look that up. It doesn't have representation. So the point is they lived in different types of areas, but they were all counted here after this Magefa in terms of creating this federation of clans, of tribes. Now let's get to the stars of our show, the daughters of Zelophehad. The daughters of Zelophehad of Manassite family, son of Hefer, son of Gilad, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, son of Joseph, came forward. This is in 27:1. The names of the daughters were Machla, Noah, Hagla, Milcah, and Zerach. It names them a second time. They stood before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the chieftains, and the whole assembly. It's a constitutional Congress. At the entrance of the tent of meeting, and they said, our father died in the wilderness. He was not one of the faction, Korach's faction, that banded together against God, but he died for his own sin. A little bit of color, a little bit of context, and he has left no sons.
That's an interesting verse, right? That he wasn't a bad guy. He may have been a sinner, but he wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't a rebel.
But again, the way I take it is, and I said in the intro, the disenfranchised. Here you have a constitutional Congress 3,000 years ago. If you had to pick the lowest of the low, you might pick 5 daughters. Clearly women this was not a matriarchal society. And then not only were there 5 daughters, they were 5 daughters of a self-proclaimed sinner. They're coming up and they're showing it all. They're saying, we are the disenfranchised. They say that, but the problem is you have just created this amazing methodology of dividing the land equally and fairly. We got a little question here, and it relates to us, because what is going to happen to our father's portion? Now, I know many people are going to read women's lib into this, and clearly, as I said before, the fact that these are women making the first constitutional argument is definitely significant. No one can take that away from the text, but what they're arguing for is not women's rights. What they're arguing is they have punctured a hole. They found an inconsistency in this rule of dividing up the land, because their father's portion will fall through the cracks.
Right. I mean, that's correct. I mean, they found a problem in the law, and that's so interesting, because the Torah is the book of the law, and these women have found the fact that the case that's not covered. We do that all the time. We study Talmud all the time. It's all about cases and what cases are covered and what cases are not covered. But here it's the Torah itself, which almost sounds like the Talmud. These 5 women almost sound like they're rabbis who were sitting and studying the Talmud.
And I think there's a piece of Talmud that says just that they were brilliant and they got it right. And of course, God said to Moses, the plea of Zelophehad's daughters is just. You shall give them a hereditary holding among their father's kinsmen, transfer their father's share to them, like any constitutional law or ruling from the Supreme Court. There were some conditions. In Numbers 36:6, it says, provided they marry into a clan of their father's tribe. No inheritance of the Israelites may pass from one tribe to another. So again, Rabbi, putting on my constitutional hat, when you were trying to get those 13 states to join the Union, that was not the time to get a little soft and say, but there are some times where Rhode Island is going to get diluted because its daughters are going to, no,
Correct.
you have to be strict.
They were not allowed to dilute the tribe.
They were not. So I want to point out something that I've kind of been hinting at. There are many women in the Torah who we have no clue what their names were. Noah's wife, no name, but she features in. Lot's wife, no name. Pharaoh's daughter, Jephthah's daughter, who drove a stake through the Sirach's head. We don't even know her name. And here we have these 5 women who are mentioned 3 times. It is unbelievable. I mentioned in the introduction that these were not only women, but they were daughters of a Sabbath desecrator. Where did I get that from? So as regards what the sin of the father was that the daughters refer to, Rabbi Akiva said that he was the man who gathered sticks on the Sabbath day. Rabbi Shimon said he was the one of those presumed to disobey God's command. But again, Rabbi, I think if you're trying to make a constitutional case that everybody in this clan, everybody in these families, from the highest to the lowest, is represented, I don't think you could have picked a better case than 5 daughters who had no brother, no man running the house, and their father was a famous sinner. He was the guy gathering those sticks on Shabbos that was put to death. It's quite remarkable.
Quite remarkable. Now, the second opinion is that he was from the Mapilim. That does relate to the case of the spies. But, the Mapilim were the people who went up. They try to conquer the land of Israel on their own. In a way, they were just overly aggressive. But, what they wanted to do was not altogether bad.
I love that it brings in different potential narratives, but each person has an identity here. These are not numbers. If that is something that comes across in this narrative, I think it's because it's intended. And now, a word from our sponsor. If there's one thing we value at Madlik Podcast, it's reading texts and talking about them. That's why I'm excited to share something I created called Voice Gift Play. It fits in the palm of your hand like a remote control and clips onto any book. It's inspired by those old school museum audio guides, but this is personal. VoiceGift Play stores up to 10 hours of audio across 999 numbered recordings. You simply enter a number to record a comment, memory, or explanation, and enter the same number to play it back. It's perfect for B'nai Mitzvah practicing their laning, capturing Grandpa's favorite tune, or recording Chad Gad Yar in a voice that matters. Go to voice.gift. That's www.voice.gift and use code Madlik for 15% off. Thanks. And now back to our podcast. Let's go a little bit further. Before we move on to the Constitution and July 4th, I just thought it would be helpful to put a period in Zelophehad's constitutional query. We are about to celebrate Tisha B'Av. People might not realize that while Tisha B'Av is the saddest day of the year, a few days later, the 15th of Av, it's like Valentine's Day in Rabbinic Judaism. That girls used to go dancing outside, and it was considered one of the most happy days. This was the day, according to the Talmud in Ta'anit, in which the members of different tribes were permitted to enter one another's tribe. So literally, it goes back to Zelophehad, and it says, you know what? We're not Rhode Island joining the 13 anymore. We've lived in the land. People feel a little bit more comfortable, and maybe what defines us is less that we belong to that clan, but more that we, we're a New Yorker or we're a New Englander. There are other things that define us that won't be challenged by a woman marrying outside of a historic clan. These laws developed, these identities of the different clans developed, and I just think it's precious.
Absolutely precious. Fantastic.
So now we're going to get into federalism. And in the first parsha of Bar Midbar, Numbers, we talked about a scholar named Daniel Elazar, who makes a case that the two greatest examples of what he calls federalism occurred in the ancient Israelite Federation of Tribes and the 13 colonies. And it's going to be July 4th in a few days. What better time to bring this up to date? So he says federalism has to do with the need of people and polities to unite for common purpose, yet remain separate to preserve their respected integrities. It is rather like wanting to have one's cake and eat it too. Politically, a covenant involves a coming together of basically equal humans who consent with one another through a morally binding pact, establishing a new framework. Rabbi, I think it is sublime that the Hebrew word for the United States is Artsot Habrit.
You love that, don't you?
It is the land of the covenant. The person, Yehuda Halevi, whoever, Ben Yehuda, who formulated that, understood the subject matter of today's podcast. The covenant idea has within it the seeds of modern constitutionalism, writes Daniel Elazar, mutually accepted limitations on the power of all parties. We had that with the Benot Zelophehad. For the good of keeping the Constitution, they couldn't marry out for a few generations. But it is to preserve, and that's what they were arguing for, to preserve this federalism. So we've all seen the play Hamilton. In Federalist Paper number 9, he talks about the definition of a Confederate Republic seems simply to be an assemblage of societies. The extent, modifications, and objects of the federal authority are mere matters of discretion, so long as the separate organization of the members be not abolished. You have to keep your identity. so long as it exists by a constitutional necessity for local purposes through it should be in perfect subordination to the general authority. Literally, what they were imagining was this type of federalist association of the different states, and I would argue for the people within those states, whether those people are families, clans, or individuals, constituent parts of the national sovereignty. So I said to my good buddy ChatGPT, were there any speakers during the constitutional era who actually made a reference to the 13 or 12 tribes and reflected on them and the states? So there was a Reverend Joseph Huntington, pastor of the First Church in Coventry, Toland, Connecticut. And he says, these 13 United States or tribes of Israel, making a clear comparison in language to the civil structure between America and Israel. Good old Thomas Paine says that the Hebrew form of government was a kind of republic administered by a judge and the elders of the tribes, and that it was sinful to acknowledge a king other than God. Rabbi, one thing they all agreed upon is when we get to the book of Samuel and the Israelites pick a king, that was the end of it.
That was bad.
They were picking their George.
Right.
But until then, they were a shining light on the mountain. There was another preacher named Samuel Langdon, and he actually became the role of Harvard College. He was the president of Harvard from 1774 to 1780. Langdon recounted how God had commanded Moses to bring 70 men chosen from among the elders and officers and present them at the tabernacle so that they might share the burden of government with him. Remember Yitro? That's what Yitro is about. Thus, the American preacher concluded a Senate was constituted as necessary for the future government of the nation. Like Huntington before him, Langdon purposely conflated the American or Latin and Hebrew nomenclatures. Let's have a drum roll. Senate with Sanhedrin. Exegesis was foreseeable the Hebrew government. I never would have dreamed, Rabbi, but there are scholars that say that the Senate took its name as much from the Greek Senate as from the Sanhedrin. So every tribe, Langdon pointed out, had elders and a prince with which Moses did not interfere. Those tribal leaders had an acknowledged right to meet and consult together with the consent of the congregation to do whatever was necessary to preserve good order and promote the common interest of the tribe. In short, according to Langdon's interpretation, the tribes resembled the American states under the Constitution. They were quasi-autonomous, semi-sovereign entities. Also, as in the United States, the local government of the Israelite tribes was structurally very similar to the general government. Each had a president and senate at its head, while the whole of the Hebrew people assembled and gave their voice in great matters. Instead of the 12 tribes of Israel, we may substitute the 13 states of the American Union. That is a quote.
That's a quote. That's amazing.
You can find in the show notes the text of these speeches. The main speech by Langdon is called The Republic of the Israelites, an example of the American states. And this is not history in reverse. This was in 1788. He delivered this, but he was a lifelong believer in it. John Huntington also talks about what he does is he actually shows that he's a scholar, and he read Parshat Pinchas, because he says we find the nation by divine order composed of a number of states, that is to say 13, called the tribes of the children of Israel. Jacob had 12 sons, but then the tribe of Joseph was subdivided and became 2 tribes, i.e. the tribe of Ephraim and the tribe of Manasseh, which made 13 united, free, and independent states. They didn't have to be, and they didn't all make the direct connection, but it's cute that this one did.
Right. Very
It
good.
shows the level of knowledge they had of our scripture. I used to go to public school PS6 in Manhattan, and we used to pledge allegiance to the flag every morning. I understand that in Congress, they pledge allegiance every morning. I wish they would pay attention and have a little more kavanah. But the history of the Pledge of Allegiance was written not in the 1700s. It was written by Francis Bellamy in 1892, 27 years after the Civil War. And I put that in there. It was when our nation was broken, when the Constitution cracked, that he felt there had to be, and this was a minister, by the way, in the original verbiage of this, it was written for the youth. It did not include God's name. He decided not to put that in because he didn't want to divide people.
Right.
It says, I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You have this one nation, and you have liberty and justice for each individual. This kind of sums it up. And Rabbi, if it reminds you in Deuteronomy 29, when it says, God says, Atem nitzavim hayom, you stand this day, all of you, before the Eternal, your God, your tribal heads, your elders and your officials, the entire body of Israel, your children, your wives, even the stranger within your camp, from wood chopper to water drawer, to enter into the covenant of the Eternal your God, which the Eternal your God is concluding with you this day, which with its sanctions, in order to establish you this day. And we're on the steps of Moab, about to cross into the promised land, as God's people, and in order to be your God as promised you. I think that 250 years is a good time to look at our declarations, look at the commitments, to pledge allegiance to this amazing concept of being united, disparate people united by an idea that doesn't detract from our individuality, but actually celebrates our individuality, but makes us one and united for a greater good.
Love it. Happy July 4th. Happy 250. Here's to another 250 and many more.
Yes, and we will survive any Megefa. Actually, the silver lining of surviving a Megefa, of going through a hard time, is reconstructing and rededicating ourselves. And I think both in America and Israel, we are going through tough times. We need to rededicate ourselves.
Amen.
Before we sign off, we'd like to leave you with a question. This week's Parsha reminds us that unity doesn't require uniformity, that tribes, families, and individuals can remain distinct while sharing a common covenant. So here's our question. What is the one value or commitment that can still unite people who profoundly disagree? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment below, and let's continue the conversation together.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Happy July 4th.
Shabbat Shalom, Yom Ha'atzmaut, La'artzot HaBrit Sameach. See you all next week.